Marvel Rivals is finally getting its own rendition of the symbiote Spider-Man suit, aka the Black Suit. This outfit will be a part of the upcoming Season 3 Battle Pass. However, it seems like the design of the suit has the community divided. There's a lot of people that absolutely love this rendition. However, there's also a lot of people that don't believe it quite lives up to the original. This is one of the unfortunate circumstances where I believe I lie on that side of the debate. So in today's video, I'm going to be analysing Marvel Rivals Black Suit, alongside taking a look at some of the other symbiote designs in Marvel Rivals. I'll be comparing it to various adaptations of symbiote Spider-Man and trying to determine what makes a good Spider-Man Black Suit. Now, of course, before we do jump into today's video, I just want to set a couple of things straight. If you like the Rivals version of skin, that is absolutely fine. And this video isn't intended to necessarily tell people that they're wrong. I'm also making this because I like Spider-Man and I like talking about Spider-Man, and the Black Suit is one of my favourite alternate costumes for the character. I think it's a pretty fun topic and I think there's some solid debates on both sides. So I just wanted to provide a better insight into my perspective on the matter and give my overall thoughts. But let me know if you're a fan of the Rivals version of the suit or not, and if so, I'd love to hear why. Anyway, without wasting any more of your time, let's jump straight in. So, first of all, before we can talk about the symbiote suit in Rivals, we need to understand what the symbiote suit is. Its first appearance was back during the original Secret Wars comic run, where the other, aka the Venom symbiote, bonded with Peter Parker, thus creating the Black Suit. At the time, Spider-Man was not aware that he was wearing a living organism, as the suit disguised itself as a cloth or spandex type material, and this remained as Peter's suit for a few years. Eventually, he pays the Fantastic Four a visit, who reveal that there is more to this outfit than meets the eye. Peter separates, eventually leading the symbiote to bond with Eddie Brock, creating Venom, and at this point, you know the rest. To say that the Black Suit is iconic would be an understatement. Its design is so simple yet so striking, and its story impact really can't be doubted. When it comes to the design, it feels much more like the case of less is more. In contrast to the typical red and blue outfit, the symbiote suit doesn't really have that much going on. It's essentially a plain black outfit with a big white logo on the chest, white eyes and white patches on the hands where Peter can shoot his webs from. This varies from the red and blue suit, which has much more colour and a more complex design when you factor in the addition of things like web lines. Now, I personally think that's something that's worth keeping in mind when looking at some of the other incarnations of the suit. It contrasts the main outfit, not just in colour, but in its overall design. It's both simple and bold. Now, comparing that to the Rivals version, I think the differences are immediately apparent. First of all, there seems to be a bizarre amount of panel lining. Now, this does look more alien-esque, but it's still extremely apparent. The panel lines cover the suit from head to toe. There's even lines around the lenses that almost make it look like eyebrows, rather than the plain white square patches on the hands. They're shaped almost more like a tooth, and they extrude outwards a bit. And then if we look at the logo, this is where the biggest difference is noticeable. The logo feels very aggressive, very sharp and jagged, and again extrudes off the suit. Now, personally, I think this is way too over-designed for a symbiote outfit. But the most unfortunate offence is that I believe it doesn't even really match Rivals Venom. Both of them possess the Mac-Gargan over-the-shoulder Venom logo, which I think is a very bizarre choice. That over-the-shoulder logo is something that come about more so with Mac Gargan's Venom the Scorpion, as opposed to Eddie Brock. But it seems to be the logo that has been used in a couple of modern adaptations of both the symbiote suit and Venom. Now, if we do take a quick look at Rivals Venom, as I've already mentioned, the logo is similar in terms of having that over-the-top design, but Venom's is much less aggressive, and again, it doesn't extrude off of his skin. I personally think the symbiote suit should have shared the same logo that Venom has. This one is much rounder and much less aggressive. It does still have a couple of lines that sort of poke outward, almost making the spider look a little bit spiky, but I still think it's a significantly better spider insignia. And Venom also has the square white patches on his hands. Now, I have heard a couple of people say when I bring this up that this Venom is from a different universe to this Peter Parker, and that is true. That being said, these are both characters in the same video game that fall under the same art style. Most of the characters are from different universes from each other in this game, yet most of them share the same art style. In fact, all of them share the same art style. And hell, I think it could have made more narrative sense if it was that Venom had shared a little piece of himself with Spider-Man to maybe help give him a little bit of a boost in their fight against Knull. If anything, I think the spider on Peter's chest reminds me more of the Christmas skin that Venom got. Obviously it doesn't have the glowing blue part in the middle, but it does have that more aggressive, more jagged design. In an ideal world, I think it would have just had the classic logo. I think that would have been much better, but I still think using Venom's logo for Spider-Man would have made more sense from the perspective of Marvel Rivals. I think it would have made more sense for the art style, and I think it also would have looked a lot better. Again, also looking at Rivals Venom, you'll notice that he doesn't have any weird panel lines going over him. And I don't understand why the symbiote skin for Spider-Man does either. You could argue that they look different to be able to tell them apart, because that is quite important in the prospect of a hero shooter, but given the build of the characters, you'd be able to tell them apart regardless. I think the most interesting part about the logo is that it barely resembles a spider. Now, I know some people will bring up the more recent retcon that the spider on Venom's chest, and therefore the spider on the symbiote suit, isn't supposed to be a spider, but rather one of Knull's Grendels. Personally, I do think this retcon is a little bit silly, but even then, neither of these logos resemble the logo that is present on Knull's chest, which arguably looks more like the comic accurate version of Spider-Man's logo than both Venom's and Peter's. On that note, I've also seen a couple of people bring up the argument of, oh, so you want it to look like the comic accurate version. Does that mean you want to see the exact same version of the suit every single time? You see, the problem with that is the fact that we don't get the same version every single time. In fact, if we look at most of the adaptations for the symbiote suit, they're almost all entirely unique. First of all, let's look at one of the adaptations that I think most people will be familiar with, which is of course Spider-Man 3. Though the black suit here isn't accurate in design, it is accurate in the terms of the narrative. The symbiote disguises itself as a spandex suit. You do, of course, see the alien goo crawl all over Peter, but he isn't really aware that a symbiote has bonded to his skin, and is just under the impression that it's an advanced spandex suit. This version of the suit is literally just a black version of his red and blue outfit. But now if we move over to an adaptation that is more accurate to the comics, let's look at the 90s series. This, in terms of TV and movies, is the most accurate version of the symbiote suit we've seen to date. It is almost one-to-one with the comic version, with the only real differences being that the comic book version is a bit more round. But the 90s series even has the blue shading when the symbiote suit is in use, and I think it looks incredible. We also have the Spectacular Spider-Man TV show. What's interesting here is that the symbiote actually evolves as the series goes on. The first version arguably looks more like the Raimi version of the black suit, with it becoming more and more alien as time goes on. You'll notice here that the symbiote actually starts going over the shoulders. Again, something we've mentioned is a trait that's been seen more so with Mac Gargan Venom, but has been used a couple of times in more modern adaptations. I don't hate the Spectacular Spider-Man version of the suit, but I do wish that the spider legs actually connected over the shoulders. But I do like the concept of the suit evolving over time, and almost becoming more so like the comic accurate version. The next TV show to adapt the black suit was the Ultimate Spider-Man series, but here it's not Peter using the suit. Initially you might think that this one looks pretty comic accurate, and in a few ways it does, but the logo looks almost way too long, and there is huge gaps between the spider legs. Which brings us to the most recent animated version of the black suit, being from the 2017 Spider-Man animated show. This one is very bizarre. The bottom legs and top legs of the spider insignia look entirely different to one another, and the spider body looks very strange. The patches on his hands are also noticeably different. This wasn't the only symbiote suit in this show, as there was also a more anti-Venom looking-esque symbiote suit that made an appearance, sporting almost a minty green colour. The symbiote suit has also shown up in a few games. Now, across the TV shows and movies that we've mentioned, you'll notice that it looks pretty different in every single one. No two versions of the symbiote suit have been the same. This isn't necessarily the case in most game adaptations, however. In the video game Shattered Dimensions, you'll notice that Peter is sporting a more purple-looking version of the symbiote suit. This is because it is the ultimate version of the character, so this one is pretty damn accurate to its comic appearance. The shading on the game does make this look like it's almost got much more of a gooey texture, making the suit look much more alien. This is also apparent in Web of Shadows, again with the suit having much more of a purple shade to it. The spider logo on this one is also a little bit different, again being a bit more jagged, but as a whole this is another relatively accurate depiction, just retaining that more slimy texture. The symbiote suit can be unlocked as a skin in Edge of Time. This one almost looks like the ultimate version was mixed with its 616 counterpart. It partially looks like it's got that purple-ish shading, but this time around this looks more like a spandex or cloth suit. Marvel's Midnight Suns is where things start to get a little bit different. Overall, this is a pretty solid interpretation of the symbiote suit. I think this is a good modernized version. It captures pretty much all of the details pretty accurately, but this time has a very alien looking texture. Venom, of course, already exists in this game. He is a character that appears in the game, so Spider-Man possessing this alien texture doesn't feel out of place in the narrative. There's no reason for him to not suspect that the symbiote is an alien, as Venom is already established. And I think that's a really good way to modernize the suit. It still captures everything that I think is special about the outfit, it still has that minimalism, that less is more design, while also still doing something a little bit unique by giving it that very alien texture. The most recent game to feature the symbiote suit, apart from Marvel Rivals, is of course Insomniac's Spider-Man 2, and we actually have several versions to talk about here. The first symbiote suit that shows up in this game, again, looks quite accurate to the comic version, but there is some notable differences. First of all, this one looks almost as if it's armoured. It also, again, has that alien slimy texture to it, but the logo and the patches on the suit look pretty damn good. I would like this suit more if it wasn't so padded, but in the context of Spider-Man 2, I can give it a little bit of a pass. Of course, in the narrative, you're under the impression that this is some synthetic cure for Harry's disease. You see Harry a couple of times in his Agent Venom style outfit, so it can make sense that the symbiote would look this way. Now, I do think it's a bit stupid for it to look armoured, and I think it can be a little bit silly when Spider-Man wears armour, unless under very extreme circumstances. Of course, although he is a very strong character, he's supposed to be quite aerodynamic. He's quick and he's agile, and I think wearing stuff that would weigh him down doesn't make a ton of sense, but of course, this isn't a suit of armour, it's the symbiote. As the story goes on, the suit evolves, akin to the Spectacular Spider-Man series, where he again gets that over-the-shoulder logo. The spider becomes much more aggressive, so do the eyes. The suit no longer looks like armour, but like he is wearing an alien. And this of course more so after you've already found out that you are in fact wearing an alien, though the suit does turn into this variation most of the time when you go berserk. In some ways I like this suit more and less than the prior version. I think the logo on the prior one looks great, and I honestly think if you took that logo and slapped it onto this one, I would absolutely love it, and I think it would be a perfect way to modernize it. But at the same time, I really do love the aggressiveness of this outfit. This is a Spider-Man that I look at and know is going to mess me up, and I do think it's quite cool. But the reason I'm less harsh on the Insomniac takes on the suit is because the classic outfit is there as an option. When you reach a certain level in game, you can unlock the classic version of the symbiote suit, which does also have some additional colour palettes. And I don't really have any notes here, this is basically the classic suit pulled straight from the comics. Even has a 90s animated series style shading option as one of the additional colour palettes. Of course, most people are going to complete the game by the time they unlock this suit, but the fact that it's an option is very nice to see. There is also the anti-venom suit here, but that doesn't really feel entirely relevant to the topic, so I'm going to move on. I will just take a quick look at some of the versions of the symbiote suit that we have seen in the comics. Spider-Man bonds with the other to take on the Red Goblin, creating this new symbiote Spider-Man, which I think is one of the most interesting and one of my least favourite takes on the suit. I don't really like how the lenses protrude off the side of his head, and I think the logo looks almost too techy, but the symbiote suit has also bonded with Peter more recently in the Venom War comics. Now this is a version that does have the over-the-shoulder logo, but honestly I don't mind this one. I actually think it looks kind of cool, especially given he lends the chains from Dylan Brock's Venom. I think this is a pretty solid modernized version of the black suit. It doesn't necessarily look too alien. Again, not that it would be a huge issue if it did here, because we're already aware what the symbiote is at this point in the story. He is voluntarily bonding with the Venom symbiote, knowing full well what it is. And with all that, that of course brings us back around to the Rivals version of the suit. Again, looking at this, I just think it's incredibly over-designed and doesn't even necessarily match the art style that has been set in place by the game. I also want to take a look at the theming of the season. It is of course centered around the Phoenix and Knull. With this, that means we're getting multiple symbiote-inspired outfits, but all of these look more so Venomized, whereas I feel like it would make more sense if they were Knullified. If we take a look at some of the other symbiote skins that have now been confirmed, we have Squirrel Girl, Groot, Rocket, Jeff, and of course Spider-Man that are all in the Battle Pass. The Squirrel Girl and Rocket ones especially are quite interesting. They seem to possess some very bizarre blue lines across the suit. It's very clear that these are supposed to be Venomized outfits, which really makes me wonder where the blue lines and the blue crystals have come from. Again, this doesn't really match Rival's Venom. Some people have tried to claim, well, Venom does sometimes have blue on him in the comics, and I'm presuming that they're referring to the blue shading that we mentioned earlier. But random blue lines and blue crystals is not the same as the shading of a comic book. It could be a fun reference, but I don't really think that applies anymore when you factor in the blue gems. There is also a couple of other confirmed symbiote skins, one of which just recently released, which is the Captain Clintar skin for Captain America. And we also know there's going to be a free symbiote skin for Storm during the next season. If anything, all of the other symbiote skins having some form of blue line, blue glow, or blue gem makes Symbiote Spider-Man even funnier, as he doesn't have any of those features. Not that I'd want him to, I'm very thankful that he doesn't, but it just makes him feel so out of place in comparison. He doesn't match Rival's Venom, and he doesn't match any of the other symbiote skins. So he's kind of in this weird place on his own where he doesn't match any of the other symbiotes in the game. There is also one other symbiote style skin that should be coming out, which is of course the one that will be for Hela from the seasonal narrative trailer, which shows her almost get amplified as she teams up with Knull. Now I think it would have made much more sense if the characters for this season specifically got Knullified skins, looking more like the Knull symbiotes from the comics, retaining that red spiral. I think this would do a better job at fitting the theme of the season and also give a bit more cohesion between all of the symbiote skins. An artist by the name of Dijon actually went on to edit the Marvel Rivals symbiote Spider-Man skin to look more like a nullified version, and I think this is a pretty cool, creative and unique design. I think this would have fit the season much better, and since this would have been a Marvel Rivals original, I don't think it would have been anywhere near as divisive, as it would have meant we would have had the normal symbiote skin alongside it. Not that that symbiote skin would be guaranteed to look comic accurate, but I think having both of those options would be quite cool. And again, I just think given the seasonal antagonist is Knull, giving the characters with symbiote outfits Knull ones instead would make much more narrative sense, and would allow for some cool creative designs that actually fit in with one another, rather than some of the Venomized skins possessing some features that other ones do not, and none of those skins matching Venom in this game. I did make a short the other day on the Rivals Battle Pass, where I mentioned that I liked most of the skins. I was just a little bit disappointed in the symbiote Spider-Man design, which for some reason has had me crucified in the comment section. As I've already said a couple times, the symbiote suit is one of my favourite, if not my favourite suit for Spider-Man. So yes, I'm a little bit disappointed in its overall design. Will I still get the Battle Pass? Yes. Will I still use the skin? Probably. But that doesn't mean I have to like it as much as everyone else. Now I have seen a lot of people bring up that we could get a more accurate one in the future. In fact, the exact words that a lot of people have used is that we will probably get one in future. And although I don't disagree, we also have no evidence to back up this claim. I definitely think it'll happen eventually, but that'll probably be a good few years from now. Unless Rivals starts increasing the output of skins that they release on a weekly basis, because as of right now we only get 2 per shop rotation. I genuinely think it'd be a good few years, and even then we're just relying on a couple of things. One, maybe Rivals starts doing classic versions of skins, ones that are intended to look more comic accurate. 2, they potentially use the cloth black suit that is gifted to Peter by Felicia in the comics. Yes, that's right, not every version of the black suit is actually the Venom symbiote. Sometimes it is just a spandex outfit that just exists to look cool, and because Felicia finds it attractive. This shown up in a couple of iconic moments. Most notably, it's what Peter wears when he goes to beat up Kingpin in prison during the events of Civil War. Of course, he actually takes the suit off during the fight, but I just thought that was a fun little fact. Alternatively, we could see a more classic one if they ever decide to add more skins from Spider-Man 2, or if Tom Holland eventually dons the black suit in an upcoming Spider-Man movie, but then of course we're relying on that looking more like the comic book version too. Anyways, on that note, I think this video has been long enough. I really enjoyed taking this deep dive look into the black suit, looking at some of its different variations across media. Of course, I know we haven't looked at every appearance of the black suit, and I really don't think we need to. I think I looked at it enough to get my point across while bringing up some of the arguments made against and for the Rivals version. Again, I just want to make it clear, if you like this suit, great. I'm happy for you. As I've already said, I'm still going to pick up the Battle Pass, and I'll probably still use this skin. Spider-Man is my favourite superhero. I know that's a generic pick, but I love this character. So far, he is the only one that I have reached Lord with on Rivals, though I do play quite a variety of heroes, because if I keep playing the same character over and over again, it does get a little bit stale. Though I would happily play Spider-Man over and over again, but sometimes your team needs support, or sometimes your team needs a tank. And as we all know, with great power, there must come great responsibility. Anyways, let me know what you think of the symbiote Spider-Man skin down in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one.